Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Downfield Read podcast. This is the very first episode that I am doing for Downfield Read. I am your host. My name is Jeff, and I think that's the first thing that we are going to have to address together. The whole "my name is Jeff," because every time that I say that, all I hear is Channing Tatum from 22 Jump Street saying, "My name is Jeff." So let's make this our first official poll. We'll get your opinions here on Downfield Read. Do I stick with Jeff? Do I change it? I could use my initials. My initials are JD. I know that I've met a few people in the last month or so from this new adventure that I'm on with Fantasy Turf Wars. And if you don't know what that is, please check that website out. Fantasy Turf Wars is like fantasy football on steroids. So go ahead and check that out. It's really cool. 64 teams, 4 divisions of 16, ultimate fantasy football. Go ahead and check that out. But I've met a few people from Fantasy Turf Wars. JJ Wang and DJ Dove from the Fantasy Couriers. They use initials. TI from Titans Idiot Nation obviously goes by TI. So maybe I go by JD. Third option, DR right in the football. Dr. Football, we could go with that. Or give me a fourth option, whatever you think. Let's get some ideas out there because I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do My Name is Jeff for the podcast. So, first thing I want to address real quick, last night was the ESPYs. I had no idea that the ESPYs were going on. I don't know if anybody even watches the ESPYs anymore, but the only reason why I saw that the ESPYs were on was because I saw that Patrick Mahomes won Best NFL Player. Best NFL Player, Patrick Mahomes. Holy cow. I don't even think Patrick Mahomes was the best quarterback last year. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for that, and that's fine. Great. He's got 3 Super Bowl rings. I get it. He's a very good quarterback. He's led his team to some big games. He's won big games. He's got the rings to show for it. Great. But as far as I know, the ESPYs are an annual thing, unless I'm mistaken. Maybe somebody can fill me in on that. ESPYs are an annual thing. So to get Best NFL Player, don't you have to be at least the best player in your position, which I don't think Patrick Mahomes qualifies for. He threw for 4,100 yards last year, somewhere 6th in the NFL. 67% pass completion rating was 11th. 27 touchdowns put him at 8th. QBR of 63, which was 8th, and a passer rating that was 12th overall with a 92.6. The only thing that Patrick Mahomes actually finished top 5 in last year, he wasn't number 1 in anything, mind you. The only thing that he finished top 5 in was the number of interceptions thrown. He was tied for 4th. He had 14 interceptions. So to put him in that category of best football player, I'm not seeing it. And while, yes, I am a Baltimore Ravens fan, I'm not advocating for Lamar Jackson. I think it's wonderful that he won his second MVP. MVP meaning most valuable player on that particular team. Yes, most valuable player. I don't think there is a most valuable player. You take Lamar Jackson off the Ravens and it's a crapshoot, to be honest with you. Who knows what's going to happen in that kind of a situation. But the other players that were in there, you had Myles Garrett. And Myles Garrett, just to kind of tell you what kind of a joke I think that the ESPYs are at this point, Myles Garrett wasn't even the best defensive player last year. Best defensive player in my mind, and while it kills me to say it, is from the Pittsburgh Steelers, is TJ Watt. If you look at it statistically, categorically, between the two of them, Myles Garrett and TJ Watt, he beats him in everything. Myles Garrett, 33 solo tackles. TJ Watt, 48. Myles Garrett, 42 total tackles. TJ Watt, 68. Sacks, Myles Garrett had 14. TJ Watt, 19. Tackles for a loss, Garrett, 17. Watt, 19. Passes defended, Garrett, 3. Watt, 8. Interceptions, Garrett, 0. Wyatt, 1. Forced fumbles, they tied. Garrett didn't beat Wyatt in anything, literally, last year. So I wouldn't even say that he should have been the guy. Who I'm saying should have been the guy is the fourth person that they had was Christian McCaffrey. And if you look at Christian McCaffrey, 1,459 rushing yards last year. Great, that was first. At least he was first in a division with other people in his position. Not only was he first, it was 292 yards over the second place running back, who was Derrick Henry. And Christian McCaffrey played in one less game than Derrick Henry. Not only was Christian McCaffrey a great runner, but he was also a great receiver. He caught 564 yards Just for a receiver, that puts him in the same range as like a OBJ or a Noah Brown or a Hollywood Brown or Michael Williams, who's in Arizona, if you don't know who Michael Williams is. 2023 was last year. 2023 was also his total rushing and receiving yards combined. Just as many passing yards as Kenny Pickett, Mac Jones, and that's for passing. I mean, let's look at the guy as a player. That was your best NFL player of the year. Not Kermit the Frog. Why are there so many songs about rainbows? It's not Patrick Mahomes. I'm sorry. He's not even the best quarterback in the league. But not going to beat a dead horse with that. Just wondering if anybody else saw that. The ESPYs last night. Let's get into today's show. Today's show, this is what we're going to do for a little bit. It's kind of a state of the division type of a show. We're going to talk about the NFC North today. NFC North with the Vikings, the Bears, the Packers, and the Lions. We're going to go back to last year, see what they did. We're going to go to what they did in the offseason here, who they lost, who they added, who they drafted, what their strength of schedule looks like, and we're going to predict how they finish the year this upcoming season. So let's start with the Vikings real quick. They had Kirk Cousins last year. I think everybody knows that. He only played 8 games, got hurt. They should have moved on from Kirk earlier if they wanted to get some money for him. They could have traded him much earlier. And I had actually said previously last year, before Kirk Cousins got hurt, Atlanta was one of the destinations that he should have went to, as well as the New England Patriots could have picked him up. They could have had something a lot better than what they did. But this year, so what do you got in Minnesota? Quarterback Sam Darnold, who is on his 4th team in 7 years, couldn't beat out Brock Purdy in San Francisco, couldn't beat out Baker Mayfield in Carolina. He's your guy, apparently. He comes over from San Fran, better than the other options that they had last year with Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins. We'll see how he actually does, Sam Darnold. You also drafted, obviously, J.J. McCarthy from Michigan last year with the 10th overall pick. I like J.J. McCarthy. A lot of people don't like J.J. McCarthy. 10th overall pick. He completed 72.3% of his passes, threw for 29.91, 22 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. What I like most about him, not just that he won a national championship, but he beat all 5 of the teams that were nationally ranked that they played against. Yes, they went undefeated, and he beat all 5 of them. That is something that you cannot say about any other quarterback that's in the league. Does he have the prettiest long ball? No, not really. Does he have the strongest arm? No, not really. But he's a very efficient quarterback, which is what I think something that the Vikings have lacked for quite a while now, outside of Kirk Cousins, who they no longer have. Last year, the Vikings struggled in the running game, to say the least, with Alexander Mattison after giving Delvin Cook the goodbye, which I also thought was a gigantic mistake. The guy made up 70% of your offense, and you're just going to show him the door. But that's what they did, and they suffered for it. This year, they've got Aaron Jones, who spent the last 7 years with Green Bay. He's going to be 30 in December, so it begs the question, like, you know, if you've seen the Hard Knocks show, they're looking at, oh, we can't go with a running back that's over 30. Oh, that'd be terrible because 30 is so old. Like, they just stop being a running back at age 30. But Aaron Jones going to be 30. They might have a point because he only played 11 games last year. He had a little bit of an injury issue with a sprained MCL that took him out for 3 games. He had a hamstring issue that took him out for 3 games. Overall, didn't do too bad, 4.6 yards per carry, which was tied for 9th. Only had 2 touchdowns on that Green Bay squad, split in time with A.J. Dillon. But he's in Minnesota now. That should be interesting come Viking Packer time. Wide receivers, y'all know them. Y'all love them. Justin Jefferson, one of the best wide receivers in the game from LSU. Only played 10 games as well. 68 receptions, over 1,000 yards. Really great wide receiver, fantasy football-wise. But is he going to have injury issues this year? Just got that gigantic contract. Should be feeling pretty good about himself. I think they did that because they knew they were going to bring in Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy. You got to make your best player happy, right? 107.4 yards per game last year, was second to Tyreek the Freak Hill. What do you do? Jordan Addison was a rookie last year. Everybody loved Jordan Addison. I don't think he's going to do as well this year, but I think he's a great compliment. He got a lot of good starting experience last year with Justin Jefferson being out, 70 receptions, almost had 1,000 yards for himself, and also had 10 touchdowns. So I think that 1-2 punch right there, I think that's going to be great. And let's face it, their number 3 wide receiver is not going to be Brandon Powell, who is the number 3 technically on the Vikings roster. It's TJ Hawkinson. 15 games last year. For tight ends, he finished with 95 receptions. That's second overall, 960 yards, which is fourth overall, and 64 yards per game, which is only second behind Travis Kelce. So let's face it, TJ Hawkinson, great wide receiver. That offense should be clicking if the quarterback play is there. On the offensive line, they've had their struggles up and down. They were kind of meh last year. Christian Darrisaw was in his 4th year. He was really good. They had to bring in Dalton Risner, Garrett Bradbury at center, Ed Ingram, Brian O'Neill. They're all kind of meh players. Hopefully that offensive line can gel a little bit more this year. They're not making any moves on that offensive line. They brought in Risner last year. They re-signed him. Awesome. I think that was the right move over Ezra Cleveland, who just wasn't working out. So great job on the offensive line. Hopefully they can gel a little bit. Overall, on the offense, they were 10th in total yards. They were a better passing team than they were a rushing team, obviously. 5th in passing, 29th in rushing. Obviously, they addressed that with the Aaron Jones addition to the team, 22nd in points overall. And let me tell you, J.J. McCarthy, we've hit on him already as far as like a notable offensive draft pick from last year. I don't think he starts the year. I think Darnold starts the year this year, but their schedule is so hard in the beginning of the year. I think what you're going to see is that Darnold starts the year. They go 0-5, maybe 1-4 if they're lucky. And then he's out by week 6 when their bye is. Enter the J.J. McCarthy era in week 7, and we'll go over their schedule here in just a little bit. As far as their defense, their biggest playmakers last year, Danielle Hunter, 16.5 sacks. That was 5th overall. 23 tackles for a loss. That was tied for first with Max Crosby. So not to say that he is a loss to look over because he's definitely a loss. He's gone now. He's in Houston. And as well as DJ Wanham, linebacker, 8 sacks last year. Those were the only 2 guys that had 5+ sacks on the whole Vikings roster last year. He's gone. He's in Carolina. So they lost those 2. What do? Well, they bring in a couple of new guys. How about Jonathan Grenard from Houston? It's almost like they did a swap. Jonathan Grenard played well in Houston, 12.5 sacks last year. That put him tied for 5th, 15 tackles for a loss, a forced fumble. They also brought in, from Houston, inside linebacker Blake Cashman, 2 sacks, 9 tackles for a loss, 1 pick, 106 total tackles. So they brought in some linebacker help there. I think that's gonna be great. Not only that, but they also added Andrew Ginkel from Miami. I think it's gonna be fun to see that group play together. Their defensive line is the same though, so they've got the same guys on there, except for Jerry Tillery, who's going to take over at that left defensive end. He didn't do much. He came over from the Chargers. He spent the last 4 years there. And then at right defensive end, they've got Jonathan Bullard, who's going to be 31, and their nose tackle, Harrison Phillips. Decent, I guess, defensive line, but the linebacker crew is really going to help them play this year. As far as defensive backs, they're bringing back Byron Murphy Jr., who led the team with 3 interceptions last year. Cameron Bynum at safety, who had 2 picks, 2 passes defended, 3 forced fumbles, and 94 solo tackles, which was 6th in the NFL. So great open field tacklers there. At the other cornerback position, Shaquille Griffin, whose name is bigger than his numbers. He's been often injured over the last couple seasons. This is his 4th team in 4 years. If he can come back and play healthy, I think it'd be great. But like I said, his name is bigger than his numbers at this point. And then at the other safety position, you have Harrison Smith, who's 35 years old. He's losing a step. He's with his 13th year in the Vikings. He was drafted in 2012. I think that one's going to be a tough one. 0 interceptions last year, which was only the 2nd year in his professional career that he did not have at least 1 pick. I think that shows you a little bit that he's going to start to slow down. They really should have addressed the safety position in the draft, and they didn't quite get there. What did they do in the draft? Well, obviously we talked about J.J. McCarthy, but we didn't talk about what I thought was the biggest pick in the draft for them. How about edge Dallas Turner? Dallas Turner with the 17th pick overall. I had Dallas Turner going number 8 to Atlanta, so it's a little bit of a sweet justice that Atlanta snipes your quarterback, but then they take another quarterback in the draft, which honestly I thought was the worst pick in the entire NFL draft, to take Penix Jr. right there at number 8. I don't care what the story is with frozen footballs and throwing dots and all that kind of stuff. I don't see it. He should have never went number 8. They should have taken Dallas Turner. They needed defensive help as well. Instead, he falls number 17, and I think that's a great pick for the Vikings. What does that make? It makes for a very interesting, like I said, linebacker room, which now you've got 5 great players for your linebackers. What are you going to do? I think it's going to be interesting to see what that defense looks like this year. They can do a lot of really fun things. So wait and see, I guess, on that one. The other draft pick that they did have as far as a defensive mention, cornerback Kyrie Jackson from Oregon, who unfortunately in the beginning of the month lost his life in a car accident due to a drunk driver. A very sad situation. I don't want to get too depressed on this podcast about it, but unfortunately that young man will not see his dreams come true to play in the NFL. He could have been a piece that they brought in, moved around. He would have been a very good player, I believe. Overall draft grade for the Vikings, though, I'm going to give him a C+, only because they got 2 of the top 12 picks that I would say, but they gave up a ton in return. They gave up draft capital this year. They gave up draft capital next year. And if JJ and Dallas Turner are not explosive, if they don't turn out, it's going to be crippling for this Minnesota team. So my 2024 prediction for the Vikings, their strength of schedule hasn't changed. They were tied for 15th with a 500 schedule last year. They're at about a 500 schedule again this year, tied for 16th. I think they're going to take a mini step back just because their schedule seems to be a little bit harder. They're going to start off slower, and then they're going to enter in another quarterback, and that's going to change everything up. I think they go 6-11 this year. So looking at the Minnesota Vikings schedule this year, it's kind of fun to think about, unless you're a Vikings fan, of course. But you start off week 1, you're at the Giants, which I think is going to be a loss. And then you're ushering in San Fran and Houston. You're playing both of them at home. Those are 2 of the better teams in the NFL. I think you've got loss. At Green Bay, that's going to be a loss. And then you're overseas to play the New York Jets. And I think that's going to be a loss as well. So you're entering in your bye week at week 6. I think you're 0-5. Best case scenario, you're probably 1-4. Best case scenario. And then week 7, you can usher in the J.J. McCarthy era. Week 7, and I think this pays off because you've got Detroit at home. So I'm going to call that a win. I think J.J. starts, and he's got to win right away against Detroit. I know that Detroit is good. I get it, but it's an inter-division game. So we're going to say a win for Minnesota there. Then you're at the LA Rams. That's going to be a loss. Indianapolis at home is the next week. I think that one you could probably pull off, but Indy is going to be a good team this year as well. And then you've got at Jacksonville. That's a loss. At Tennessee, I'm going to call that one a loss only because you're on the road. I think Tennessee and Minnesota are very similar in what they have for talent on their teams. But I'm going to call that one a loss just because it's in Tennessee. Then you're at Chicago for a loss. You've got Arizona at home for a win. And then a fun game, Atlanta in Minnesota, right? So you got Kirk Cousins is coming back. And I think Dallas Turner is going to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder for not being selected number 8 by the Falcons. I think Minnesota plays this one tough, and they win that game. You've got Chicago the next week on Monday Night Football. That's going to be a win. But then you're at Seattle week 16. That's going to be a loss. Green Bay at home will give you the win. At Detroit to finish out. And I think at that point in time, the Lions are going to be playing for a number 1 seed. And they're going to be playing tough. They're not going to be, unless they've already got it locked up, you might squeak one out there. But I think the Lions are going to take that one in Detroit. That puts you at 6-11. And I think that's where Minnesota starts the season this year. It's a little mini step back from where they had themselves at last year with 7-10. But I think all things considered, when you look at all the changes that they've made, the new additions to the team, I think that's going to be as good as it gets for them. If they're lucky, maybe they go 7-10 again. But on to the next one. So the next team that I want to talk about is Chicago Bears. So I was right on last year with the Vikings, saying that they were going to finish at 7-10. And the Chicago Bears were the second one that I was close on. I was only 1 game off. They finished 7-10 as well. I said that they were going to finish at 8-9. I thought they were going to have a little bit better year than what they did. Their strength of schedule was very easy last year. They had the 5th easiest schedule right behind Miami. So that played in their favor as well, even with the bad quarterback play. And we all know the situation. Justin Fields, 13 games with the Bears, didn't do as well, I guess, as the organization wanted him to do. I think it was a little foolish for the Bears, I will say, to get rid of Justin Fields. He was coming into a 4th year of his rookie contract. You didn't have to pick up the fifth-year option. Nobody's even talking about that at this point. I think it could have been a prove-it year for Justin Fields. You could have surrounded him with the same weapons that you brought in for your number one guy right now, number one overall, Caleb Williams. And I think he would have played, if not better, he would have played well. I'm not a big fan of Caleb Williams. I don't think he's going to do very well. And I'll just say it. I think Caleb Williams is going to be a bust. And it has nothing to do with the fact that he has a pink phone case. It has nothing to do with the fact that he wears pink lip gloss. It has nothing to do with the fact that he paints his nails. Okay, it might have something to do with those three things, just a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think when you're looking at him statistically, what he did in college, he completed 68% of his passes, which is good in the NFL, not so great in the college rankings when you've got guys who are completing 75, 77, stuff like that. 30 touchdowns and 5 interceptions is good if you're just looking at that by itself. But when you take into account that Jaden Daniels actually had 40 touchdowns and 5 picks and then 10 more touchdowns on the ground, Daniels looks like a much better quarterback. But what I really look at is three big things that are glaring to me is the fact that Caleb Williams went 0 for 4 against ranked opponents last year in college, could not beat the tougher college teams. The second thing is that he never really had a come back from behind victory. So his leader aspects or his leader traits are really kind of showing to me in that. And the fact that he wanted ownership options right away from the team that was going to draft him. The fact that he jumped up into the stands and was crying in his mom's arms. The fact that he comes out and after the draft, he puts on this show, which makes me think he's more of a social media quarterback than he actually is a professional quarterback. He puts on this show, I'm on the Bears. Look at, I'm a Bear. It's like, man, what are you, 8 years old? Grow up a little bit. And I think that's what he has to do. Mentally, he has got to grow up a little bit. I don't think he's going to be able to take the pressure. I don't think he's going to be able to beat better teams in the NFL, just like he did last year in college. So that's my take on Caleb Williams. As far as the running game got better from last year. They had Khalil Herbert and they had Donta Foreman. Well, this year they're bringing in DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift should have put up better numbers than he did in in Philadelphia last year. He put up over 1,000 yards, 1,049 yards, which was good for fifth. He only had 5 touchdowns, and I'm going to blame Hurts and the tush push on that one. He should have had more touchdowns. But overall, he averaged 65 yards per game, which was 12th overall as well. I think DeAndre Swift is going to be a better running back than they've had in a while. Wide receivers, they still have DJ Moore. DJ Moore was fantastic last year, 96 receptions, over 1,300 yards. They got rid of Darnell Mooney. Not a big deal because they brought in Keenan Allen. Now, Keenan Allen is 32 years old. He spent the last 11 years with the Chargers. He had a heel injury last year. So he only played in 13 games, but even in those 13 games, he had 108 receptions for 1,250 yards, 7 touchdowns, 95 yards per game, which was good for 4th in the NFL last year. Not to mention they got Rome Odunze. So with the 9th overall pick, he had 92 receptions, over 1,600 yards, and 13 touchdowns with the Washington Huskies last year. So you've got 3 great options there. And then at tight end, you've got Cole Kmet, who's, I think, as much of an underrated tight end as you could possibly get in the NFL. 73 receptions, that's tied for 7th, 719 yards, 9th overall, and then 6 touchdowns, which was tied for 2nd as far as those tight end rankings go. You've got some great weapons. The only question mark, and I think it's a huge question mark, I think, is Caleb Williams. I think he's got some emotional issues that he's going to have to work through. I don't know if he's ever going to get to that number 1 overall ranking expectation. I think if the Bears were smart, they would have passed back on this one, just like they did with Bryce Young. That would have been a better way to go. Their offensive line was average last year, kind of a mess, actually, with the injuries that they had on it. But they are bringing back Braxton Jones at left tackle. He played 11 games for him last year. Tevin Jenkins is in now at the left guard position instead of Cody Whitehair, who is 32 years old. He's off to Las Vegas now. He only played in 11 games. They've got a new center in Coleman Shelton from the Rams instead of Lucas Patrick, who's 31 years old. He went off to New Orleans. And then they've got Nate Davis starting his 2nd year with the Bears at right guard. And then Darnell Wright, who is by far their best offensive lineman last year at right tackle. And by the way, he was a rookie that they took 10th overall. Probably the best offensive lineman on that team. Overall, their offense wasn't horrible if you're just looking at the rushing. Technically, they had Justin Fields there, who was more of a rushing quarterback than he was a passing quarterback. They finished second in rushing, but they did finish 27th in passing, 18th in scoring. Notable offensive picks. We already talked about Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, but they also drafted an offensive tackle by the name of Kieran Amigdaji from Yale. Sorry, I had to take a breath on that one, but could not figure out the pronunciation on his name. And I think he's going to end up being a very good kind of fill-in piece at that offensive tackle position. Defensively, they kept a lot of their same defensive players that they had from last year. Montez Sweat, who they got in the middle part of last year from Washington when they were doing their sell-off sale there. 12 and a half sacks last year, 14 tackles for loss, 3 forced fumbles. Great job for Montez Sweat. Justin Jones is not there anymore. He went off to Arizona, but they do still have DeMarcus Walker. Their linebacker core is, I would say, one of the better ones in the league as well. Love TJ Edwards, love Tremaine Edmonds. They both had fantastic years. TJ Edwards, 91 solo tackles last year, puts him at 8th, 3 interceptions, 2.5 sacks. Great job from the linebacking crew. Otherwise, from their offensive line standpoint, they've got, we already talked about Walker. DeMarcus Walker's coming back at left defensive end, Sweat at the right defensive end, and then they've got Andrew Billings at defensive tackle. They run a 4-3 defense. I don't see that they're going to switch that up too much. And then they've got Jervon Dexter, who 2.5 sacks last year, who they drafted with the 53rd pick overall. Their linebackers, I mentioned before, Edwards. They've got Edmonds, and their other outside linebacker is Jack Sanborn, 1 sack, 1 INT in his 3rd year with Chicago. DBs, they've got some really good defensive players. Jalen Johnson, 4 interceptions. Oh, by the way, Tyreek Stevenson, 4 interceptions. Tremaine Edwards, 4 interceptions. You can pretty much see where they're going to rank as far as overall interceptions on the year overall as a team. Cornerback Stevenson, they picked him 56 overall last year in the draft, so you had a rookie there. New free safety, Kevin Byard III from Philadelphia as well. He's going to be 31 in August. We'll see how he plays out, but then they've also got Jaquan Brisker that they drafted with the 48th pick in 22. So they've got a relatively young defense, which is why I'm bringing up all the different draft picks that they've had, 21, 22. Very, very young defense in there, and a lot of guys that are on their 2nd year with the team. That should pay benefits for them this year. Last year, they were all playing together. Now they've got that experience together, and they'll be ready to go this year. First in rushing last year, or rushing yards allowed. They did not give up very many rushing yards. One of the better defenses, actually the best defense as far as rushing, but they were 25th in passing yards allowed. So whether you want to say the chicken or the egg came first, maybe teams weren't rushing against them, and they were just going right to the pass. Either way, it doesn't really matter. They were 31st in team sacks. Again, might have had something to do with the fact that teams weren't passing against them a whole lot, but they were also first in interceptions as well. So draft grade, what I will say is I will give them a D+ overall, and I know a lot of people are going to groan on that one. They picked no defensive players. Maybe you could throw in punter Torrey Taylor from Iowa that they picked in the 4th round, but other than that, they picked a quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, punter, and D end in the later rounds. D+. I don't like the Caleb Williams pick that much. I think Rome Odunze, I think he's going to be a great wide receiver in the league, but that's all that they had. Really just the 2 guys that are going to make an impact this year. So D+. Strength of schedule in 2024, they've got another easy one. 4th easiest schedule in the league, right along there with Carolina. So the deck is stacked against me if I want to say that Caleb Williams is not going to have a great year, right? He's got all these weapons, and this is why I said they could have kept Justin Fields. They could have traded back. They could have got maybe another interior offensive lineman to help out there, and they would have traded that 1st round pick away, move down a little bit, pick up some future draft picks, and keep that ball rolling in that direction. Could have built a great dynasty in Chicago, and I just don't think that they did it with Caleb Williams there. Deck is stacked against me, like I said, as far as the ease of schedule, the players that are there now. I still don't think that they finish very well this year. I think they go 5-12. Honestly, I think they go 5-12, and Eberflus is the fall guy. He'll take the hit for it. Head coach gets fired. They go to a new head coach. They're going to let Caleb Williams run the show, and that's going to be a big mistake. But looking at Chicago's schedule, Tennessee at home, sure, that's a win. At Houston, they'll lose. At Indy, they lose. Rams at home, I think the Rams are just a better team in general. They'll lose. They've got Carolina at home. There's a win. You're playing Jacksonville overseas in week 6. I think that's a loss. Jacksonville wins that game. You've got at the bye week, then you're 2-4, and I don't think that's very unrealistic. Come off the bye week at Washington. I think coming off the bye week, you could possibly win this game, but I think it's going to be kind of a chip on your shoulder type of game for Daniels, who wasn't picked number 1 overall. Maybe he should have been. I think that's a loss. I think he comes out and he outplays Caleb Williams. You're at Arizona. I think that's a loss. New England at home, sure, we'll give you the win. We'll give you the Green Bay win at home in week 11. Minnesota, win. At Detroit, that's going to be a loss on Thursday Night Football. At San Francisco, that's going to be a loss. At Minnesota, that's going to be a loss on Monday night. Detroit at home, I'm going to give you a loss on that one. I don't even think you can beat Detroit. And then you've got Seattle, week 17, at home on Thursday Night Football. Yep, that's a loss. And then at Green Bay, you're going to lose again. So I think it's a terrible season. The over-under for the Chicago Bears is 8.5. And a lot of people are saying, oh, they're going to go way over that 8. Oh, they're going to make the playoffs. Oh, they could potentially make the Super Bowl. No, they're not. They're not. Sorry, that's Chicago. That's the take. That's the downfield read. We pick it apart. We put it back together. That's where we're at. So let's move on to the next team. We've got the Detroit Lions. Last year, they finished 12-5. I said that they were going to go 10-7. I still said that they were going to win the division. They did win the division. I just didn't think that they were going to win that many games. And what a powerhouse team that they were in the NFC last year. Strength of schedule was a 481, so they were tied for 21st with the Bucs as far as an easy schedule. And I'm a big fan of Dan Campbell. A lot of those wins are because he's got cojones, man. He's got some gumption there to go for it at the end. Live by the sword, die by the sword. He definitely did both last year, especially in the playoff game against San Fran. But they're bringing back a lot of good, young, talented players this year, and they've added some really good players as well. Everybody knows Jared Goff is there. Number 2 overall for passing yards, threw for 4,575 passing yards. Completion rating was number 7. Touchdowns, he was number 4. QBR was number 11. Passer rating, he was 9th overall with a 97.9. Guy is a legit top 10 quarterback, whether you like it or not. And I think people could make an argument for a top 5. I'm not sure he's top 5. I think he's somewhere around that 7, 8. But I like Jared Goff, and I think he's going to do the same thing this year for the Detroit Lions. They got the same running game. They got that two-headed monster, David Montgomery, who ran for over 1,000 yards last year. He had 4.6 yards per carry, tied for 9th. 13 touchdowns was 4th. 72 yards per game was 6th. Oh, by the way, they've got Jahmyr Gibbs as well, who they said that they were going to run even more this year. Rookie, he almost ran for 1,000 yards as well. 945 yards, 5.2 yards per carry, which was 4th. He had 10 20-plus runs, which was 2nd overall. I think that alone is going to be enough for this offense to sustain what they did last year. But now we get into the wide receivers. We get into the passing game. Holy cow. Amon-Ra St. Brown, tied for 2nd behind Tyreek Hill in receptions. It was 3rd for receptions with 15-15 and had 10 touchdowns, which was 4th. Yards after the catch, he was 2nd, 668. So the guy can kill you downfield, but if he catches it short, he can also bust one out on you. They had Josh Reynolds last year. He's gone. He's in Denver. But they still have Khalif Raymond. They still got Jameson Williams, which I think a lot of people are going to sleep on. He did only play 12 games last year, caught 24 for 354 and 2 touchdowns, but I think he's going to come out this year in a big, big way. Oh, and they have Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta, who was also a rookie last year. They drafted him with the 34th overall pick in the 2nd round. He had 86 receptions, which was 4th. He had 889 yards, which was 5th for tight ends. Oh, and he had 10 touchdowns. 10, which was the most for tight ends last year, and the next level was 6. So he killed it. He's a big red zone target, and that's what they've got on the offense as far as weapons, and it is scary again this year that they brought everyone back with exception to Josh Reynolds. Their offensive line, one of the better offensive lines in the NFL last year. They have left tackle Taylor Decker. He's going to be 30 in August, but he still is playing well. The Lions drafted him with the 16th overall pick in 2016. Left guard, Graham Glasgow, going to be 32. They're getting up there in a little bit of age. He's going to be 32 in August. Played right guard last year, but he's going to move over to left guard. Why? Because at right guard this year, they've got Kevin Zeitler, who they brought in from Baltimore. He's going to be 34. They've got some age on that line. He's entering his 13th season there. And then you've got Frank Ragnow, who the Lions also drafted in the 1st round back in 2018. And at right tackle, Penei Sewell, who they drafted in the first round again with the 7th overall pick in 2021. So most of their players they've drafted, most of them were in the first round. They've got, as far as the offensive linemen, they've got a solid offensive line again. I like moving Glasgow over to the left guard position and bringing in Zeitler. He was a solid right guard for the Ravens last year. Overall, for the offense, they were 3rd in total yards, 2nd in passing, 5th in rushing, 5th in points scored. One of the best, if not the best, offenses in the NFL, behind maybe the San Francisco 49ers. Notable offensive draft picks that they had: offensive tackle Giovanni Manu from the University of British Columbia. He was their only offensive draft pick in the first 4 rounds. He went 126 in the 4th. So that's what they've got going there. Hopefully he can take care of some of the older individuals that are still playing on that team. He'll probably take over for left tackle at some point in time. Defensive playmakers for the Lions. Everybody knows Aiden Hutchinson, 11.5 sacks last year, was tied for 12th. He had 14 tackles for a loss, 3 forced fumbled. Great defensive end overall. He's coming back. Defensive tackle Alim McNeil, 5 sacks. He's going to be entering his 4th year with the Lions as well. Let's go to safety. Kirby Joseph, 4 interceptions last year, 69 solo tackles, 11 passes defended. Safety Brian Branch, who was a rookie last year, 3 interceptions, 13 passes defended. They had a great defense last year, a great young defense. So Hutchinson, they play a 4-3 defense in Detroit. Hutchinson is going to be at that left defensive end. They brought in a new defensive end, 6-year veteran, Marcus Davenport, who spent the last 5 years in New Orleans. He spent 5 years in New Orleans before last year when he was in Minnesota. So they poached one away from a division rival. He only played 4 games last year with the Vikings, but still got 2 sacks. At one of the defensive tackles, we already talked about McNeil overall. And then the right defensive tackle, 31-year-old DJ Reader, who spent the last 4 years in Cincinnati. Last year, 14 games, 1 sack, 34 tackles. Defensive line should still be pretty solid. When we're looking at the linebackers, Jack Campbell, rookie outside linebacker. No, not the Nicolas Cage character from The Family Man. He is Jack Campbell, outside linebacker, Detroit Lions. They've got Derek Barnes. They have Alex Anzalani, who basically looks like a combination of Tarzan and Fabio at the linebacker positions there. So defensive backs, they've got some decent defensive backs as well. Carlton Davis III spent the last 6 years in Tampa Bay. Last year he played 12 games, had 2 picks, couple of passes defended, and one of the biggest pickups that the Lions had, the other cornerback that they're going to be starting this year, Terrion Arnold, who last year they picked, or I should say in this year's draft, they picked at number 24, and he's gonna get into this defense with strong safety Brian Branch as well, and Joseph, who we mentioned before. The defense as a whole, numbers don't look great. 19th in total points or total yards allowed, 27th in passing, 2nd in rushing, 11th in total INTs, 23rd in team sacks. So it's a good thing that they've got a powerful offense because the defense is still trying to find its way. And I think they went heavy D. Obviously, they only picked the 1 tackle in the 4th round. They went heavy D this year. First pick being Terrion Arnold, cornerback from Alabama. They traded up for him. I had Arnold at 15. I thought he was going to go much sooner. So for the Lions to get him at 24, I think that is a huge value pick. Oh, and by the way, they're pairing him with their next pick, Ennis Rakeshaw. They picked him in the 2nd round at number 61. He's coming from Missouri, who I thought was going to be a late 1st round, early 2nd round guy. Turns out, hey, late 2nd round. They've got their DBs covered for quite a few years if those two pan out. And in the 4th round, at pick number 132, they took safety Sion Vaki from Utah. So they went heavy D-backs in this draft, and I think it is really going to pay dividends for them. Their draft grade that I'm going to give them is an A-. I think they had 2 great DBs. Like I said, it really helped their depth there. They addressed the one thing that they needed to, which was defense. They made a move to get a great player. I love when teams do that. 2024 prediction, their strength of schedule. Obviously, it gets a little bit harder because of how they finished last year. They've got the 11th toughest schedule, still not bad. But I think with the additions that they made to the team, the lack of losses that they made to the team, they go 13-4. And they are a scary team this year. They got better from last year, from their 12-5. And so that's why I'm giving them one more game. 13-4, that's a hard thing to go on. Only one team did it last year. It was the Baltimore Ravens. 13-4, that's where they're at. Let's take a look at their schedule real quick. They have what I think is a pretty decent schedule, all things considered. They start at home against the Rams. How about that matchup again with Goff and Stafford? I love that. They're going to win that one. Tampa Bay at home, they're going to win that. At Arizona, that's a win. Then you've got Monday Night Football at Seattle, or with Seattle coming to town, and that's a win. So week 5, they get their bye. They're going in feeling really good. They're 4-0. Then they're at Dallas. And I got to tell you, if it wasn't for them coming off the bye, I don't know if I'd give them that win because it's at Dallas. And I think they're very evenly matched this year. But I'm going to give them the win in Dallas only because of the bye week and because of how that game went down last year between the two teams. At Minnesota, I'm going to give Minnesota that one. We already discussed that. Tennessee at home, that's a win. At Green Bay, I think Green Bay will edge them just because it's a divisional game. Those are always a little bit harder. At Houston, there's another loss. Jacksonville at home, there's a win. Indy at home, win. Chicago, Green Bay at home. Sorry, Indy was on the road, but it's still a win. 2 back-to-back Thursday games. You got Thanksgiving in there. Chicago, Green Bay, win-win. Buffalo at home is a win. At Chicago, they win again. They're going to sweep the Bears. At San Fran, that's a loss. And that's where it comes into play. They might have to win that game in Week 18 against Minnesota at home. I don't think that they're going to have a problem with it. The only way that they drop that one is if they've already got the number 1 seed locked up, or if they can't benefit by winning in that game. And I think Minnesota loses that one. Otherwise, that could be a one that Minnesota gets away with. But we'll see. That's how I see the Detroit Lions coming out this year. Next team that we have not talked about at all is the Green Bay Packers. They are the 4th team in there, and I know everybody's licking their chops. How is he going to have the Packers? Everybody's wondering about the Packers. Well, here's what we've got. We've got Green Bay. You got Jordan Love. Jordan Love played really well in essentially what could have been considered his rookie year last year, because it kind of was. He was playing behind that other guy that we heard so much about all preseason long. When's he going to sign? When's he going to go? Aaron Rodgers. Now he's with the Jets. Jordan Love came out really well last year. 64.2 completion percentage, was tied for 22nd with Desmond Ridder. That's generally not where you're going to want to be, but he was 32 in touchdown. He had 32 touchdowns, which was 2nd overall. Quarterback rating put him in the top 10. Passer rating put him in the top 10. Top 10 for passing yards. You got to say that Jordan Love, whether you like him or not, he is a top 10 quarterback, which pisses off a lot of Vikings fans that I know, because they go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, and it looks like Jordan Love is going to be there for probably the next decade. And meanwhile, the Vikings go through 3 quarterbacks a year, and they've got 3 quarterbacks in the last 40 years. It's ridiculous. Anyway, at that halfback position, we already talked about Aaron Jones is gone. He went to Minnesota. But you know what? I think they got a better guy for him. Josh Jacobs. I think he's going to be 26 this year, Josh Jacobs. And let's not forget Josh Jacobs. Please don't forget this guy. Yes, he played for a bad Raiders team last year. The year before that, he was actually the rushing leader. So let's not forget that. In 2022, he rushed for 1,653 yards. This guy can still play football. He's 26. So that is a mean weapon to pick up. If he can stay healthy, he had a quad injury last year, but if he can stay healthy this year, that's going to be really scary. What's not going to be scary is their wide receivers, which they did nothing about actually this year. I know Chad Johnson is really high on Jaden Reed. I'm not. I don't think so. He's a rookie last year. They drafted him with the 50th overall pick, 64 receptions, 793 yards. Great. That's fantastic. Christian Watson was out. Call it rookie luck, whatever you want to call it. Romeo Doubs was their next guy. 59 receptions, 674 yards, 8 touchdowns, and then Dontavius Wicks, who was also a rookie last year. This was my biggest complaint about why I thought, and here's where I'm going to bring it up. Last year, Green Bay finished at 9-8. Okay, they snuck into the playoffs. They had a really good playoff game, a couple of really good playoff games actually, even the one that they lost. I said the Packers were going to finish 4-13 because, and yes, I have gotten some flack for that, but I thought that they were going to finish 4-13 because their wide receivers were unknowns. Christian Watson doesn't seem to be able to stay healthy, which was the case again last year. And Jordan Love was unproven. And everybody was kind of questioning. They were on the fence 50-50 if this guy was going to be the guy or if he wasn't going to be the guy. Turns out he's the guy. So that's kind of why they got into that 9-8 finish. I said 4-13. Worst pick that I made in the NFC North. At tight end, here's another thing. Tucker Kraft, who was a rookie last year, 31 receptions, 355 yards. Luke Musgrave, who was a rookie last year, 11 games due to an abdominal injury, 34 receptions, 350 yards. They just didn't have the receiving core that I thought was going to help out Jordan Love. It just wasn't there. And then on top of that, you've got, two running backs who are getting a little up there in age. I didn't think the offense was going to go as much as it did. But the offense actually did do pretty well. Offensive line really helped them out. Offensive line was arguably top 10 offensive line. Left tackle, Rasheed Walker, was in for David Bakhtiari. But now I'm guessing it's probably going to be Jordan Morgan, rookie that they picked out in the first round this year. He'll be starting at left tackle. Left guard, Elgton Jenkins, who was decent. Their center, Josh Myers, who was good. Sean Ryan, who replaced John Runyon. And then right tackle, Zach Tom, who is probably their best offensive lineman on the team. And they picked him up in the fourth round of 2022. So really great offensive line. I got a little bit better this year too, which is going to give Jordan Love some more time. I think he's going to need it with the wide receiver situation that I don't think has improved that much at all. Offensively, 11th in total yards, 12th in passing, 15th in rushing, 12th in points scored. Kind of that 9 and 8 offense, isn't it? It's kind of right in the middle. They're above average offense. Defensive playmakers. Should probably mention what I just kind of did. Jordan Morgan from Arizona. They picked him with the 25th overall pick. I thought Green Bay was going to go cornerback just because they've had some issues at cornerback. They didn't address that issue this year as well. I thought that they were going to get Nate Wiggins. He was right there for the taking. They decided to go offensive tackle. I thought Morgan was going to fall to number 31, so Morgan's a little bit of a reach, but I think he can be that guy that they need at left tackle. And then they went running back with Marshawn Lloyd from USC. Great running back, 116 carries, 820 yards, 9 touchdowns, averaging 7 yards per carry. Yeah, that's pretty darn good. So now you've got a backup just in case Josh Jacobs doesn't work out for you, or maybe if he gets hurt, whatever it is. Defensively, they had some pretty decent playmakers last year. Rashawn Gary, 9 sacks. He led the team, 2 forced fumbles, tied for 28th overall. Defensive end, Preston Smith. They're both coming back on the defensive line. Defensive tackle, Kenny Clark, 7.5 sacks, 9 tackles for a loss, 2 forced fumbles, and defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt. All of those guys are coming back. Their front four, because they run a 4-3 defense, all 4 of those guys are coming back. At their linebacker situation, you got Quay Walker, who they drafted with the 22nd pick in 2022, had 2.5 sacks, 1 pick. You've got outside linebacker Isaiah McDuffie, who they also drafted in 21, and then middle linebacker Edgerrin Cooper, who was a rookie last year. Is a rookie this year. I'm guessing he's going to start at that middle linebacker position. They picked him with the 45th pick overall in the second round. He had 8 sacks, 2 forced fumbles last year at Texas A&M. So the linebacker crew is kind of a question mark, but the front 4 should make up for that fact. At cornerback, they got Jair Alexander, who played 7 games last year with an AC joint injury, 5 passes deflected, 1 forced fumble. They picked him 18th overall in 2018. Cornerback Eric Stokes, who played 12 games in the last 2 years. Or you pick cornerback Keyshawn Nixon. And it's just a mess looking at their defensive backfield. Free safety. They picked up this year Xavier McKinney from the Giants. He spent the last 4 years there. He's been injury prone. 2 of the last 4 years, he's played in 9 games or less. And then they've got strong safety Javon Bullard, who is a rookie. They picked him in the second round, number 58 this year, and he had 2 INTs, 5 passes defended at Georgia last year. So their defensive backfield is a mess. They didn't do much to address it. Like I said, I think they should have went cornerback instead of an offensive tackle, but I'm not running the show there, so it's hard to say. The defense, 17th in total yards overall. They were 9th in passing yards allowed, 28th in rushing yards allowed. Really easy to run against these guys, probably because of the linebacker situation. That was kind of a mess. Teams got ahead of them. They were able to run the ball very easily. Notable defense draft picks that they had, like I mentioned, Edgerrin Cooper, 245, picked him 45th overall from Texas A&M. Safety Javon Bullard. Linebacker Tyron Hopper from Missouri that they picked in the 3rd round. Another safety, Evan Williams, that they picked from Oregon in the 4th round. So not great as far as that defense backfield, but they did address it in the draft. Draft grade, I'm going to give them a B+. They had 11 total picks. They picked 2 linebackers, 2 safeties, 2 offensive tackles. They missed out on the cornerback. That's the only thing that I give them any kind of flack for is you didn't pick up a cornerback, and your cornerbacks are injury prone. They're not good. They're a mess. So I thought that was actually the biggest need on the team that they could have solved right away, but they decided to pass on it. But overall, great draft, B+. Missed that glaring need, though. Decided to go for Jordan Morgan instead. The 2024 strength of schedule for the Packers, it's going to get a lot harder this year. They had the 25th toughest schedule last year. This year, they are tied for the hardest schedule, or for 4th for toughest schedule in the league with the Houston Texans. So my prediction for this year for the Green Bay Packers is 9-8. I think it's the same thing. I'm not trying to be a cop-out. I think you're going to see a little bit of a sophomore slump. I think you're going to also see the wide receivers that stepped up last year. They're not going to do as good. You've got some growing pains on that defensive backfield. I think 9-8 is a really good one, especially for the strength of schedule that they have. It's a lot more difficult. So when you're looking at Green Bay, at Philadelphia, overseas, I think Philly's just overall a better team. Nobody's got home field advantage, but I think Philly wins that one. So Green Bay loss. Indy at home is a win. At Tennessee is a win. Minnesota, win. At the Rams, I think that's a loss. Arizona at home, win. Houston at home, loss. At Jacksonville, win. Detroit at home, win. You're looking at a bye week of 6-3. Not real bad, but I think the wheels fall off that second half of the season. You're at Chicago, and I had a hard time with this one. At Chicago after the bye week, I gave them a loss, even though I think they could probably win that game. But it's a divisional game. It's against Chicago. You just never know. San Fran at home is a loss. Here's another question mark. Miami on Thursday night at home. I gave them the win. I think that they're better than Miami is this year. And then you've got at Detroit the following Thursday. I think that's going to be a loss. At Seattle, I think that's a loss, even though they might be able to pull that one off. New Orleans at home is a win. At Minnesota, loss. And then Chicago at home is a win. So I've got them at 9-8, but I think that's the basement right there. I would not be surprised if they finished 11-6. Wouldn't be a shocker because there's a lot of question marks on there. I think it's really going to depend on the health of the team overall. But I think that's what you're kind of looking at. Do they make the playoffs at 9-8? I think you're going to have to win some tiebreakers, and you're going to have to follow along to see how I actually predicted the rest of the NFC to see if that one actually comes to fruition. But I think it goes in the same direction as last year. You've got Detroit taking it home. You've got Green Bay, a possible wild card in there. Minnesota, and then Chicago is falling on their butts. So that's how I've got the NFC North. Please, would love it if you would like, if you would share, if you would follow. We've got a lot more football to talk about. Would love you to join me on that one. If you've got any suggestions, please do so. Otherwise, again, please let me know about your thoughts on the name. Is my name Jeff? Or is it JD, Dr. Football? Or what is it that you think that I should call myself? Otherwise, thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good one.